Welcome to Hip Replacement, the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. I'm your host, Ben Dietz.
And I'm your host, Kyle Raymond Fitzpatrick. Every week we get together and talk with guests from Gen Z and beyond to try and understand just exactly what's going on in the current moment.
Because we're talking about these generations. All right, we're back. Hip Replacement. This is episode 5. I'm here with Nico and Kyle. And Kyle, you introduced me to Nico. Help me understand why. Because,
Yes.
as usual, this podcast is about you guys explaining things to me.
Absolutely. Okay, so I will do a quick intro of Nico and then quick intro of how we met. So Nico Cevallos, also in Barcelona as well, originally from Ecuador, who runs the Creative Destruction newsletter and is a really amazing culture strategy thinker, post design. That's sort of how I think of you, Nico, but I know you do a lot.
Okay.
In my mind, that's where you sort of fit. Nico and I have sort of like, we had a funny sort of like friend meet cute in Barcelona where we were both at a talk for Missouri, right? Was it Missouri?
Yeah, it was in my previous work setup.
Yeah, and which is a really cool architecture studio in the city. And afterwards, Bobby and I, we didn't know anybody there. We just went and we listened. We left. And afterwards, we went to this like one of the 4 or 5 like natural wine bars in Barcelona. And we're waiting.
Very millennial
and then,
of you. Very millennial.
Yes. And then we're waiting and Nico walked up and was like, "Hey, do you run the Trem Report?" And I was like, "I do."
Wow.
And then we started talking, and from there, then like we ran into each other at an art fair, and then from there we sort of like started hanging out. And Nico's now a good friend here.
Okay, so basically, was this your first time ever being spotted on the street? Like, hey, aren't you?
Well, for the Trend Report, yes.
Yeah,
I've been spotted for other reasons, et cetera, but like that was the first time. Like I was like, "Whoa, the Trend Report is real. People are reading this and see it in the real world." Yeah.
It's also because you have green hair. So it's like,
yes,
when you like end up with when you know the face of the person that's behind the newsletter, I think it stays longer because you have the green hair. So
yes.
If I would have seen you and you didn't have the green hair, maybe I was like, oh, maybe it's him, but maybe it's not. But because of that, I was like, I'm really sure it's his. I'm going to ask just to be polite.
And that is a very conscious choice I made when I was in grad school years ago, in like the late 2010s. I was like, I dyed my hair green, and I was like, this is great. And then like I started to go to readings, and people kept being like, oh, the guy with the green hair. And I was like, so like for whatever reason, that color hair really resonated, and like I haven't gone back because like it's a good calling card.
Visual branding, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
The best calling card.
Well, Nico, welcome. I am constantly impressed by Kyle's curation of guests on the show, and just generally speaking, all of the sources and inputs that he pulls from. So you're in a highly esteemed company. I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit to start with about my current generational complaint. As the name of this podcast is Hip Replacement, because I've had both of my hips replaced. Nico, I don't know if you are aware of that, but just like...
I didn't know that specific detail.
That's true. I have titanium hips. I go through the special metal detector every time now. It's really good. Anyway, there's an article that I found this morning in Delia Kai's Hate Read series about how somebody hates elastic pants. And I just wanted to ask you guys about that, because I feel like I, in my younger days, would have taken a stance like, I hate elastic pants because of there's certain kind of sartorial correctness or a way that things were supposed to be done or whatever. I've in my advanced age, I've reached a point where I don't care about that anymore. Elastic pants are fine. But what made me curious about this particular piece was not the take, right? Like, I get it, but more that I started to think about why Hate Read is all anonymized, and why these things which are not controversial takes are, need to be hidden behind some sort of pseudonymous attribution. And I just wonder whether is that I don't know, is that a generational thing? Is it like, have you guys grown up in a way where, because you could participate as, handles and avatars, essentially, like you haven't needed to take credit for opinions, and so even the ones that are most anodyne are like need to be anonymized. This doesn't make any sense to me.
This reminds me very much of when like someone uploads something that doesn't belong on close friends, and you like see that story and you're like,
okay,
why is this here? This is not to be hidden from the world. Like, okay, this is. But aside from that joke, I think
that's a good joke.
I don't know. I think people I think it really depends, and like it fluctuates. Like sometimes people don't wanna hold the weight of what they do online, which is what happens most of the time. I think people have been called out and canceled because of tweets that they made, or like posts, or like supporting someone that they aren't supposed to. So I think we have also like even distance ourselves from like what are like actual takes and what are like soft takes. So depending on the day, someone would believe that something is like a big take when it isn't. Depending on who it is and what you work on, what do you do for? Because for example, if this takes comes out from like a buyer inside of like a fashion company, maybe it's a bad take.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Go ahead, Kyle.
Well, I was I mean, that's a very good point. I am of the opinion, well, really quickly, I've written multiple times about how I hate elastic shorts, pants, whatever, because I think they're just lazy. But that's separate.
This was the pseudonymous writer's argument, basically.
Yeah, but like
which I don't
I agreed with it. Yeah, but like the being anonymous thing, I think, and Nico, correct me if you have a differing opinion, is that like I feel like it's less the anonymous expression. Like that's not necessarily the thing here. To me, there's a few factors. Like one, I feel like it's very like Gen Z safety internet, meaning that like I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want anybody to be mad at me. And I think a really good example of that is like the recent seasons of like RuPaul's Drag Race. They have been really sort of like boring in ways because there are younger queens, or all the queens in general, specifically younger queens, will come on and they don't want to they don't want anybody to hate them. They don't say anything mean. They don't act out because they're protecting their brand, and it sacrifices there being good drag and good TV. And like that's a very big phenomenon. I think that's sort of like that self-awareness is really killing a lot in a lot of ways. Like I think it's even down to good friends who are, for like better words, nobody, not wanting to post online because they're like, well, who's gonna see it? I'm like, well, no one's gonna fucking see it. It's the internet. Like, I'm sorry.
The algo will confirm or will guarantee that no one sees it.
Totally. And the other thing which I think has escaped me, but oh well.
Okay.
There's something else to this.
Yeah, I mean, like I start thinking about like, okay, is it a strategy because you're later going to reveal who the person is and it's going to be something notable, but it doesn't feel vital to me, and in a way that I mean, it's almost like I don't want to put my name on this because this take is so anodyne that nobody cares.
Well, I think it's also like, ooh, I'm so bad, and it's like that's not bad. You just are very vanilla. Like you are very, which is also like, it's that sort of like, oh, I'm not going to be bad tonight. And then you're like, what, you were just going to have a piece of chocolate cake? Like, fuck off. Have that cake. But the other thing too, that this is what I was going to say, is that like the other elephant in the room is the sort of like false power. We could call her like false import of anonymity, a la like Dumois and like Diet Prada and like that sort of like era of the internet, which still exists. But like there is something like really cool about that, and like that is not like I feel like it's a part of the internet of the past, but it's part of an internet that raised, let's say, some people to then behave in a way where like anything lightly salacious, are like, I gotta go on mute in a way.
Right.
I think there is a big interest into this like anonymous takes that are not really anonymous because there is like a context. Like for example, in the example that you passed, like it's not a thing that it's been said on Reddit. Like it's under a name still. And I think, for example, in Feed Me, some of the anonymous takes work because they go between the known and the unknown. Because I think that is what sort of like we like the idea sometimes of the unknown or the non-accountable, because they are like you were saying in Docsmoa and stuff. They're able to give us information that is not fully true, or even an opinion that is not well rested. So it's like it's sort of like they just want to get it out. And when I read the thing that you said, it did have a little bit of this. Like, just wrote this from top to bottom. I did it quickly, but I didn't thought this much. So I wanted to get things out. I think it's sort of like people don't want to hold accountability. They want the whole interaction. They want the comments. They will want to beef maybe in the comments. That's why it reminds me a little bit of Reddit too. That you want the development of what this take happens. You want to keep on going, like these Twitter accounts as well. But you don't want it to be attached to your image, because you don't want anything about you to be brought also into that opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. And having been, cancel adjacent through my many years at Vice, like, and well, whatever. It feels chicken shit to me, and that it makes me a little crazy. By the same token, I totally get what you're saying. And by the way, Nico, you just had a little malapropism that I think is really awesome and that I've never heard before, but I think is on it. You said du moi, right? The social media account as Docsmoa.
Docsmoa. I've never pronounced it out loud.
Docsmoa is kind of amazing, actually, because that's essentially amazing. What that whole thing is about, right?
Totally.
Fascinating. Well, look, anyway, I just I want people to take credit at this point. Like, I just feel like we've everything is so anonymized by the algorithm, by bots, by AI slop, et cetera, et cetera. Like the authorship and sort of origination of thoughts and ideas, however silly or anodyne they might be, is important now to me in a way that it hasn't been for a while, I think. And so anyway, that was just what struck me as, Gen X on the pod. Kyle, what about you? What was getting you this week?
So this is something that's, a few things, but I think one thing that is interesting, and this sort of comes up, and maybe this dovetails into the other thing, is there was a YouTube essay by a creator named Izzy with multiple Z's on the sort of loss of digital kid spaces, and like the loss of like, not just like Club Penguin, but when you go to like Nickelodeon.com and Disney.com, it's not like a place for a child to play. Now it's like a place for them to go shopping, or not even for them to go shopping,
monetize,
for their parents to go shopping. Yeah. So like those aren't even kids' destinations, and like there really aren't kids' destinations anymore online. So I'm sort of curious, like, because my era at least was like you had a CD you put in, and like that was a kid's destination. There was sort of like shoulder room of like playing in some digital spaces, but like most millennials were like on MySpace. Like they were sort of like whatever. But like a lot of Gen Z and younger millennials were on like Club Penguin, and we're doing Neopets, and we're doing these sort of online kids things, which no longer exist. So I'm sort of curious, Ben, on the parent end, well, backing up, now the kids just play on TikTok, and that's bad, obviously. So I'm sort of curious, like, Ben, on the parent end, was there any sort of conscious or non-conscious choices of like where kids can play online? And Nico, were you dialoguing with any of these spaces, or like, do you think that sort of like having a kid space or lack thereof has sort of shaped aspects of, say, Gen Z culture or beyond? Because I think it's also very alpha too.
Yeah, I think because I'm like old Gen Z, I did lift a little bit of like Club Penguin. I remember I had Pet Society, which was like this kind of like neo, what's the name that everybody plays on Nintendo that I never got into? Of these like customizable homes. Yeah, the islands.
Animal Crossing.
There you go.
Yeah, it was very Animal Crossing adjacent. I was in DisneyLatino.com. They had games there.
Yes.
That was everything. So I did live. I had the transition of playing on these websites and then going into like Tumblr and stuff. So I didn't live this like lack of in that sense.
The interesting thing to hear you say it, Kyle, is like the kids are playing on TikTok. My kids are, young Z's. Harper probably is, getting towards the cusp of A's a little bit. But what's it called? Minecraft, and then now Roblox.
That's true.
Those are the places. And the interesting thing about those, and particularly in the pandemic, we saw this or I observed it personally, and then we saw it broadly speaking in everything from stock price to just media coverage around those spaces, is that they are play spaces, but they are also social spaces. They are social communication spaces. Like those are the places where my kids go to chat. And even now, my daughter, who's almost 16, spends a bunch of time on Roblox, just essentially doing speedrun games and chatting with her friends. So I think it's that.
That's fair.
The tricky thing is that it's not IP that is recognizable to us, and it's a hybrid space that combines play and communication, like interpersonal communication, in a way that I also think is well, it's unrecognizable to me anyway, which is why I had that sort of parents' reflexive reaction, like, get off your stupid video games, until I realized, well, this is like me talking to my friends on the phone when I was 14.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I think is interesting about all of that is that, like, it really does collapse the whole history of the internet, because you know, when in my day, like, you had both separately, where it was like, I go on I put the CD in to play Math Blaster, or I like go to like X, or what's it called? Like, I go on like Instant Messenger, or I go to like X far away space that nobody knows about to sort of like look at pictures of like men without shirts on. But like now, like less so Minecraft, but a little bit of Roblox, like you're getting all of that collapsed into one space. Because like that's sort of like the bit, and you know, the meta sort of Oculus, whatever meta world was a good example of that too. Where like kids run around, but they're also running around and playing in ways that sort of interact with adults, and like it sort of flattens that time. So like they're not able to just like be kids in kid spaces. They are instead like dialoguing sometimes with like, you know, your daughter might be playing Dress to Impress at 16, but she's probably playing against like a 45-year-old gay man in like London. And like, that's fine. Like that's all good, but like there's
hopefully
also
it's fine. Yeah, hopefully it's fine.
But then they're also like, you know,
this is the right. And this is where we get into the sort of the risk / moral panic of the whole situation.
And I think to me it's like it's less about the moral panic, it's more about just like the loss of childhood and like the loss of like playgrounds, because like that's really important, because like the whole Sephora kid thing, the whole whatever, and like not to be like, well, but kids need to be offline, but like kids need to just be kids in kid spaces. Like kids need to just do dumb shit and like discover things on their own, versus being forced into it by economics or bad acting adults. Like,
I'm sorry, I'm laughing with you, but I also like, you know, this sort of like notion of at some point we're going to realize that we've flattened the adolescent experience so much that we now have to reinstitute it, and so it's like mandated dumb shit. Like, okay, for an hour a week, you've got to get out and just
go outside,
do some pranks, get outside,
walk,
and do some
almost
pranks.
Get hit by a car, you know, do hijinks, ding dong ditch, like do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's funny. But it also brings us to that second thing that you raised, Kyle, which was the well, actually, no, sorry. It's I was going to say dumb phones. It's sort of the first story, sort of the second story, but like the dumb phone thing. Do either of you guys know anybody that uses a dumb phone?
I don't, but in this household, we talk about it like every few months. So like seeing people who are outside of like designy people talk about it, like that's where I was like, okay, this is becoming a bigger political technological response, because it's not just like people who read Dezeen or wallpaper. It's people beyond that. And I was like, shit. So like this is actually maybe, but I don't know anybody who has one. Nico, do you?
How about you, Nico?
I've seen people get dumb phones, but actually for aesthetic purposes, but not like tech dumb phones, like 2000s Motorola's that are like Y2. I've seen like young girls get them basically and give them to each other.
Is that and that's just purely sort of a nostalgic style statement, the way that like my daughter borrows my digital camera, my Canon Elf
I think
from 2003.
It covers both things. Like they get the aesthetic of it, but at the same time they get to play on wellness, which I think it also, I've talked about this a lot in a way that there is a lot of people that seek wellness as an actual truth. Like they are seeking to disconnect, they are seeking to log off, and others that don't really care about the idea of logging off. It's about they want to log off because that's what they should be doing, but they have no interest in logging off. And these
Right.
kinds of things are very, like, it's the showcase, like you would see like this creative director that goes on the weekend to the countryside and it's posting a lot of pictures on the countryside. It's like, I thought you were really stressed and you were supposed to like go to the countryside to disconnect. And then suddenly you're posting a lot of pictures. So I think we all want the idea of disconnection, but at the end of the day, having to actually disconnect is something that we don't really maybe want to. I don't want to spoil White Lotus finale, but you should watch it and it will expand more on this.
I have not seen it. I will see it at some point. I think I already have it spoiled, but we will not spoil it for anybody listening at home because
I caught it. I'm actually not sure what you're referring to with that comment, Nico, but it'd be hard not to spoil it without getting into that, maybe.
But like I can go into other things.
You mean in the way that they take the phones away and the Ratliffs, eventually get the phones back, which is not a spoiler, right? They were always going to get their phones back.
No. It also expands into other things that happen later. But I think it talks about this idea that this whole center is supposed for you to disconnect, and like all of these dumb phones are for us to disconnect. And it's like, sometimes it's knowing how to deal with your phone. It's like, you're not supposed to like have a stupid phone to reframe your connection with your current phone.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and then we create these things that are like,
that's it.
We create these dumb phones and we create these retirements and these getaways as a way of like learning how to disconnect. It's like, life doesn't get any easier. It's about learning how to live with the impulses that we have.
Sure.
Well, I was going to say, like, this was like, again,
I have an impulse to set the snakes free.
Because, like, well, really quickly, like 10 years ago, we were having all these discussions of like digital detoxing, people going to camps to like get away from your technology or whatever for like weeks at a time. And it's like, this is the same thing, but like to that point, Nico, it's like, you're just not addressing or holding yourself accountable to your behavior. I mean, that's the bigger thing, is that like, not to my own horn, but like this year it's worked, is like, I don't bring my phone into the bedroom anymore. And like that fundamentally has changed my relationship to technology in a lot of ways beyond that. And like, you have to sort of like put your money where your mouth is. And I think the dumb phone's not going to do that. The dumb phone is just an expensive Band-Aid. And then you'll just have two phones, and good for you. That seems silly.
Congratulations on your two phones, guy.
Yeah.
Man. All right. Fair enough. Well, yeah, I think that's the thing for me is, having lived long enough without the extra appendage of the phone, I'm okay without the phone. And then I'm also good with the phone, and that maybe I'm just extra special, self-actualized, but I kind of don't think so. I think it's the way we grew up. I mean, I don't know. We'll get our series producer Campbell to weigh in the comments on that. But so Nico, what's going on? So now we're to the Gen Z section of the show. What's going on in Gen Z? What's popping?
Okay. I gotta say that.
Sorry.
I gotta say that there is this bias. There is this bias that I'm like the oldest cohort, but the fact that I work doing strategy for brands, so I'm like extra conscious about things.
Mm-hmm,
but
yeah, sure.
I give a class around communities. So I've been thinking about third spaces and community gatherings, offline and online communities, for like 3 years since I did the syllabus for it. And now every brand is like going into experience and like, let's do offline experiences and all of those things. And it has gotten up to a point where I believe that everybody wants to go out, but nobody really knows what they want to do outside. Like people are like, all of these brands are also like putting all of those things together into like, we're going to have a DJ here, and then we're going to do like a talk maybe, or like some sort. And people are going because they are attracted by the brands, by like the deers that are being attracted by lights, because everybody wants to go to these small events that they do.
That's a dark reference, because a deer attracted by a headlight is going to get hit by a car.
Probably is a little bit of that.
Yeah, exactly.
But the people that are going out are not thinking, I think there's a lack of self-reflection of what do you want to do outside as well? Like, which are the types of communities that you want? And why all of these offline spaces and experiences that, because of like hyper optimization, have been instantly co-opted by brands? Like brands are like, okay, we're going to do running clubs. We're going to do this and that.
Yeah.
There is a lack of like non-branded communities or communities that don't brand themselves so fast. Because so people end up in those like communities not knowing exactly what do they want. Do they want to flirt with someone? Do they want to meet people instead of like apps? Or want to like learn a new hobby? Usually most of these like branded communities are very low in engagement, and you're probably not going to see that people again. So it gives the idea of being out and doing things offline without actually having to engage with what happens when you go to an actual offline community. It's like you gotta hang out with people that you don't like. You're not meant to create content in that space. It's not a place to be seen. It's not a place to be recognized. Right. And in the base case scenario, you're also relating with people from different generations. So to end my take, it's not the same to go to like a branded chess club event, to go to your local chess playing community that has like from 50-year-olds to 40, 30, 20, and some 12, 16-year-olds that are genius that are playing chess, and you play with them, to go to these other ones that have this idea of playing chess. It's more of the idea of than the actual thing.
Yeah.
I made that clear.
Yeah. The simulacra, for sure. It's like the branded simulacra of actual organic kind of events. Is there any? I have one example of a brand that I think might be getting it right, possibly. And there's only one example or only one thing to mention. So you guys know Vacation, right? The sunscreen brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Vacation on Saturday launched a walk club, 9 a.m. in Miami. You meet at the thing. The first 30 people got free Vacation Walk Club t-shirts, but then if anybody else showed up, they just showed up, and it's just to walk, right? There's no performative performance, if you will, of like a run club, right? Where you are keeping a pace or you are, showing your athleticism. It's literally just this organic kind of show up. And I thought, the fact that the stakes there are so low could be an unlock for how you make those things actually gain traction, because it's inclusive without being performatively inclusive. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Nico doesn't look convinced. For those of you not watching this at home, Nico is thinking, but is not necessarily convinced by that argument.
I think we need people to get together in non-branded spaces. People need 100%. To
sure.
Because I am the one that it's making the roadmap and like making the PowerPoints on how to make this right, how to make a good offline experience, whatever. I'm actually working on one right now. That's why I also added. But I also think that besides the one that I'm offering, should have places and like you were saying, like the mall, or places, rituals, hobbies that they do outside that are not branded or are casually branded. Like they ask so little. Like, for example, if there is this park in Barcelona, like towards Forum, that it's promoted by Nike, but they are not creating content there. And kids could go there anytime. It's just by Nike because they put out the money to create the infrastructure. But there is not a ritual that they create content at a certain time, or they do some activities in the summer there. But aside from that, they have already created a space where some kids can go around and hang out. And my take is that should happen more.
Yeah.
Because I believe that all of these places people are getting together are extremely branded.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, it's interesting, right? Having sat in a million marketing meetings where people say, well, we want to do this, but we have to have some sort of proof of involvement, or we have to demonstrate achievement of some sort of KPI to justify the fact that we get money underneath. It's funny you should mention Nike, because to me, like probably the smartest thing ever said to me about that kind of approach was said to me by somebody who's at Nike at the time. And he said, grow the culture, grow the market, right? It's like, if you can grow the culture, then you have a foundation on which to engage people and to market and to productize and so on and so forth. But you can't, and this is, I think, your critique, right? You can't start with the culture is the product, or the product is the culture, and then assume that culture will flourish. Like, no, maybe you get V2 of the product, but it's not, not an expansive and evolving culture.
Yeah, and I added this thing that, like, this new app that Apple is launching to create events that I thought was interesting. It reminded me a little bit like we're going back to Facebook in a sense.
Yes, that's what I thought too.
I was like, we have this invites thing for people to get together, like the rise of this connects a little bit with the millennials, with the rise of the supper clubs and all of this, all of people having dinners and all of that. I believe that they are necessary, because if not, we are just meeting each other in bars and stuff. And it's important to just connect in our homes. But I think maybe we should go back to Facebook and use Facebook in events. It was perfect for what it was.
But that whole environment is so torched now. It's like saying, let's go back to Atlantis after the flood. It's like, it was so cool.
That's fair.
But, but we got to all learn to breathe with gills. So,
I mean, what these conversations always get back to me is just like this, like, this trying to build a roadmap back to being human again, which I feel like is like just so lost. Like, all of this stuff is like so overthought and like so overwrought. And like, look, I've been in these meetings too with brands, and it's like trying to sort of like defend to people, like, just let people be people and like don't overthink it. Are having this meeting, we're already doing it wrong. And like that, to me, like, the things that have come to mind, obviously there was a lot going into it, is like, go ahead.
What I want to just ask though is, like, there's a vector through which to see that critique as being a function of this conversation. The fact that the three of us are who we are, what we do, so on and so forth. By the same token, I tend to think that because we have broken the fourth wall to such a great degree in terms of how things are done, that this is actually a pretty natural and native conversation to most young people at this point. And I find that also very weird. Like, this is the sort of thing that should have been discussed in a boardroom, and now is just like gets navigated over eggs on the weekend.
Totally. Like, well, that's the thing is, because like, I feel like this is a larger problem. And like, to me, I think the best representation of it is like this sort of, if you ever encountered like an affiliate style creator, somebody like that, like what they do is like they just share shit that they're selling, like they're just a personal QVC, and like all of this is sort of getting into that, where like you're not important, like you don't need to be at a fucking branded thing, like this sort of like aspiring to be both a brand yourself and like this like very bourgeois, but like you are broke, you're 12 and you think you're this. It's like, you don't, like, what are you talking about that you have to go to this thing because it's branded by Reebok and it's a dinner? Like, just go to a dinner. And it's like, it's this sort of like cultural vacuousness that has really just sort of like, well, I can't do that because like there's not a brand and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's the same. Look, I've already been taking notes for an essay I'm going to write for the term report this weekend, but it's the same thing as like people saving like an invite to a very branded event that thousands of people got. It's like, that's not special. You got a card in the mail from Amazon that said it was your birthday. That was printed off of a computer by like a near slave. That is so embarrassing. Like people, it's like, people have lost the plot. People have forgotten to be embarrassed about this shit.
Right. Okay.
That's what all this gets at. That's what it brings up to me.
But there is this anecdote that I think it can like add a little bit of nuance, that when Uniqlo arrived to Barcelona, one of the things that they did to like relate with the city was sponsorship, free Saturdays from a certain hour on Magba. Yeah. And they did it for a while, actually, for like the one or first year that they were here. When they were sort of positioned in the city, they went away. And what happened is like they used that a lot. So in that sense, they were using their like all of the assets that they have publicly here and physically to promote people to go to Magba. And that thing was lost when they stopped doing it. And now they don't have a sponsor. So you still can go. This is like a complex, but you still can go to Magba free on Saturdays, I think, also. but it's costing them money, and they are deciding to do that for the sake of the city. But it helped them thrive in that sense. And that's what I meant of like, there are ways in that brands can relate and push culture in ways that are not vulturing of it, and people benefiting of this without building their identities out of it.
In this economy, that's needed more than ever. And it's like, I literally took a note. I was like, there's sort of a lack of like, again, probably 100 years ago, I may be wrong, is that like, you know, having this sort of like Rockefellers or whoever who would, out of the goodness of their heart, like really foster culture. And like, maybe their name was on it, maybe it wasn't, not in the way that it is now, but like that sort of is lost of that. It's just like, I'm going to be a patron of this thing, whether it is supporting a community or a museum or whatever. Now it's like, well, what's in it for me? Both as a brand, which then means for the people going, what's in it for me? And then like, you don't have a culture.
Yeah.
You're just having consumers.
It's interesting. I mean, yeah. Well, I think to my mind, it circles back to the place we started, and to a certain extent, like the fact that individuals, well, I don't know exactly, this isn't fully formed, but it's like there's something about the tension between wishing to be anonymous so you don't get the smoke leads us to a place where individuals will not step up in that fashion except for naked personal gain, and then that puts the impetus upon patronage for patronage upon brands and our other social structures, right? Because clearly money's being taken out of government. And so, yeah, it's a matter of getting brands to figure out how do you do this better, because it will work for you in the long term, as opposed to how do you get your logo on the thing now because you have KPIs to achieve in this, you know, reporting period.
And us learning how to like connect with other people, like proposing things to do together that are not, that they don't have to be parallels of things that are already done by brands, or they can be, but they just decided to do it outside of like a branded scenario, and you force yourself to just do it. What you said about it's about just being human, it really resonated with me.
Yeah, me too.
Just to like contrast what I was saying, I also added that link, and I've been talking with my students for a while about fourth spaces, which is this new concept that Eventbrite actually introduced in like a report. Eventbrite, the tickets events thing, and that's an important thing.
Sorry,
say.
Just for those of us who's given Nico's accent, Eventbrite is what he's referring to.
Yeah. Correct. So that was like that was found by someone at Protein Agency, and they did an article about Protein about fourth spaces. And it was quite interesting in a sense that I shared some of what they say, and at the same time, I'm curious about if we actually need something more than third spaces. Because they argue that basically, to sum it up really quickly, fourth spaces are phygital spaces, like a little bit digital, a little bit physical, everything, everywhere, basically. And it made me realize that maybe having this fourth space be nothing, it's not something that it's useful. I think there needs to be an intentionality into every single community, and what do they use to be connect online, and what do they use to be offline. I remember that 4 years ago, I was very pro the word digital because it made me look cool when I added it into like documents and stuff. Yeah, because I was younger and I was like more naive, and I was like, the brands are gonna love this. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But now I understand that
the brands loved it. I hated it, but that's fair enough.
And then I came to understand how important it is to know when you are in certain scenarios, and even like asking it, like which brand needs more of this, more of that. I don't know. What do you think about fourth spaces?
I was going to say, like, I like the idea in theory, but I think the thing that I like about it, because I think we got glimpses of this, and there was definitely a lot of conversation around this during the pandemic, quote unquote, where there were a lot of sort of like community and cultural events that were happening that sort of bridged the spaces between physical and digital. And like, I think that is something, especially, you know, living so quote unquote far from home, that I sort of long for, and I was able to do within that time period, is to, you know, have a party where my friends in Georgia and New York and LA and Seattle could all get together in one place without it being like a whole to-do. Now it's to do, but like I think I like that idea of like, and I'm thinking about, because I've had people, you know, talk about wanting to come to a Trend Report event, but they live in Canada or live wherever. And it's like there is a world where like, yeah, I set up a fucking phone and people can participate from home, but like that requires like more interaction. It's not a lot, like a live stream is very different than having full participation in multiple spaces, which I think is like, that is like, there is something there. And like, that hasn't been sort of fully cracked yet. It was sort of abandoned because of end of the pandemic, whatever you want to call it. But like that, I think
you could argue that Clubhouse was sort of that, right? I mean,
maybe, yeah.
I was just looking at the diagram in this Protein article, which is basically, it's an overlapping Venn diagram of home, community, work, and online. And then it, you know, so that's where you have your fourth space in the overlap of those four vectors. It just occurs to me, I mean, this conversation is kind of a fourth space, not just for us, but for listeners. But what you're saying, Kyle, is that without the level of interactivity, it falls short of that. Although
to me, that's like the definition of it. Like if there's no interactivity, then you're just watching something, and that's not a space. You don't have any stake in it.
Let me, I wonder though, because I think Nico's raised something really interesting, which is that supposing that I were not a part of this conversation, but I were listening to it because I'm a fan of the Trend Report or I'm a fan of creative destruction. And I am at Machba, for argument's sake, right? I'm walking through Machba, I'm listening to this on my headphones, and I'm now taking on a new appreciation for the space that I'm in. And so I am interacting with the space in a different way, right? I'm just not interacting with the conversation per se. So I think there's maybe that's the 4.5 space, or, you know, or maybe that's a different way to think of fourth spaces as well. Interesting.
Yeah. I was going to say another good example is those silly portals that popped up last year. Those were getting at it too. Like that's like, that was, and still people started flashing them. Like that was,
those
a good
are very
example.
silly. Yeah. It's funny you should say that, because I see what you mean now that you pointed it out, but also those were like so profound. It's a little bit like, to me, it's a little bit like the elastic pants thing. It's like, this is just a dumb thing.
But it got at something that people clearly wanted, and that like,
yeah.
You could basically have like a fucking whiteboard meeting room just between friends. Oh, that would kill. But like TVs don't do that. They should. It's 2025.
All goes back to the whiteboard. Nico, we're going to give you the last word here. Was there something else you wanted to say?
Well, I think we need to go to like build everything from the ground rather than like trying to grab it from the air. I think what you said is very much that is fine. Because in my class, I talk about the things that are important. It's first is finding out things that you're passionate about. And like, that's the thing, that's your driver. And then you decide if you connect online or offline with those people. If there is people in your town, go offline, find one. If there is online, find it. And then you find the place or the community. And if not, you can create it, you know? But it's based mostly on desire, on passion, and then on the people that you end up getting along with, rather than like you want to engage on online communities that maybe doesn't serve a purpose for you right now. It's more of finding first what you are actually interested into and seeking your options.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got to tell you, this has been really fascinating for me. Thank you guys. Who'd have thought that it would be an elasticized waistband that would start it all off?
Who knew?
I'm going to go put on my easy pants now. Well, listen, everybody, you've been listening. This is Hip Replacement episode 5. Thanks for tuning in. Please, if you've enjoyed this, follow us on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, and look for the Trend Report on Substack. Look for Creative Destruction. Look for Sick Weekly. And then just look for us next Tuesday when we're back again with a new guest and a new conversation. And Nico, hopefully you'll come and join us again at some point in the future too.
Awesome. I would be glad to.
Lovely.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, until next week. Bye.
See you later.